This article is 2,000 words long. 2,000 words long. Not a single sentence of it even begins to question whether the political vitriol and legislation and budget cuts aimed at police in 2020 are to blame. Not one single word. Thank you to the founding sponsor of unDivided, 1530 Mortgage. Visit them at 1530mortgage.com. We're starting right off the top with my favorite segment, Unbelievable. The Seattle Times this week posted the following article. Seattle police stopped investigating new adult sexual assaults this year, memo shows. And that is shocking, that staffing levels have fallen so low that even some of the most egregious crimes like rape are falling through the cracks. But this should surprise approximately no one. In fact, the city's former mayor, Jenny Durkin, warned of this exact scenario back in 2020 when the city council in Seattle pledged to defund SPD by 50%.
When that kind of violent crime happens and people dial 911, they expect a police officer to show up.
There will be a gap in services. As the mayor mentioned, at midnight when you're calling for someone to assist you for a rape, a robbery, or other kind of condition, there needs to be a response, and people expect that.
And at that time, the city council president, Lorena Gonzalez, who was pushing police defunding, accused the mayor of fear-mongering.
She is spreading misinformation and fear about what the council intends to do in order to undermine our genuine efforts to transform community safety in our city.
And few in the Seattle media took the former mayor and former chief's concerns seriously, outside of maybe some opinion writers and political pundits. Instead, most of the mainstream media platformed the shockingly stupid narrative that dismantling or defunding the police would somehow make our communities more safe. Fast forward 2 years and everything the former mayor and chief warned about is coming true. Hundreds of officers have quit, 911 response times are up, and yes, there is trouble responding and investigating even some of the worst crimes like rape. So, is the city council now taking responsibility for that? Not a chance in hell. And why would they? After all, no one is demanding it of them. In fact, let's take a look at that Seattle Times article again. At first glance, I thought the story was well reported. It detailed an April 11th memo sent by the head of the police department's sexual assault unit. Sergeant Pamela St. John warned command staff, quote, "The community expects our agency to respond to reports of sexual violence, and at current staffing levels, that objective is unattainable." And I spoke with interim Seattle Police Chief Adrian Diaz about that claim. And he said, look, we're trying to triage cases the best we can, but we can't get around the fact that we are stretched thin.
Because of the staffing challenges, we are still seeing higher caseloads among our sexual assault. And they're very complicated cases.
So who exactly does the Seattle Times in this article hold accountable or even attempt to hold accountable for such a serious lapse in public safety? After all, the Seattle Times reported for years on the need to take cases of sexual assault seriously, to eliminate rape kit backlogs, to make sure victims of rape were given justice. So certainly the Seattle Times would now demand answers as to how this could have happened. Certainly the Seattle Times would be pounding on the door of the Seattle City Council and every Democratic politician who supported anti-police legislation in 2020. Again, not a chance in hell. Instead, the Seattle Times seems to put the blame squarely on the Seattle Police Department, as if they're to blame for their own low staffing. The Seattle Times suggests the police department is prioritizing the wrong things, like homeless camp removals and property crime ahead of crimes like rape. The Seattle Times suggests other agencies are also low-staffed, but they're getting by just fine. This article is 2,000 words long. 2,000 words long. Not a single sentence of it even begins to question whether the political vitriol and legislation and budget cuts aimed at police in 2020 are to blame. Not one single word. I wish I were making that up, but I'm not. And in fact, the article even gives Democratic politicians a platform to express outrage over the lack of police staffing, as if they're not to blame for it. Democratic State Senator Manka Dhingra, who voted for a series of laws in 2021 that tied the hands of law enforcement to respond to violent crime, is quoted in the Seattle Times article as saying, "I cannot really tell you how pissed I am about this because it is completely unacceptable. This is 2022. We should not be having this conversation about allocating resources for survivors." You're right, Senator, we shouldn't, but here we are. And if you can believe it, the article actually gets even worse. The article mentions Seattle City Councilwoman Lisa Herbold. It reads, Seattle City Council Public Safety Committee Chair Lisa Herbold said in an email she had been communicating with advocates who have raised the alarm about victims whose cases are not being investigated. Does the article mention anything about the fact that Lisa Herbold campaigned on a promise to hire more officers in 2020 and then 6 months later turned around and pledged to defund SPD by 50%? Of course it doesn't. So now Lisa Herbold gets to act like an advocate for survivors of sexual assault, despite the fact that her own actions made it more difficult for those survivors' cases to be properly investigated, and the frickin' newspaper of record in Seattle lets her get away with it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is all you need to know about the state of journalism in America. If you like videos like this, consider becoming an unDivided subscriber. You can help continue this movement and expand this movement to give common sense a comeback. You can do that in 2 ways, at patreon.com/undivided, or by becoming a contributor on my Locals community, brandykruse.locals.com.